We still really haven't gotten into the
we should probably turn back.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that now. This is a good breaking point. So, what is it that we learn in a college education that makes a person think differently about life, about human relationships, government, all that sort of thing? So, what did you get from the articles you looked at?
Well, so what I got was nobody has adequately answered this.
Oh,
that's what I really got. And I think we should talk about this, but acknowledge that like until somebody really does study this,
right,
formally,
right,
there's always going to be some like speculation involved.
Yeah, we're speculating, we're philosophizing here. This isn't based on our hard research or anything like that. So.
I mean, I can tell you what in my education experience made me flip from conservative to liberal. And that was essentially the realization that a proper worldview values truth first.
Okay.
That what is real, what is true, what is factual matters more than like what is correct according to a group, right? The education gets you out of groupthink. That's how I'll put that. Right. And part of this was I was educated in a religious environment, so it was questions of like, oh, can you even ask that question? Should you even be talking about this as a possibility? Because this goes against what the orthodox view is. And it was you said in class one day, like, hey, if it's true, it's God's truth, right? Because all truth is God's truth, right? So you shouldn't be afraid to ask any questions.
Right.
And I think that became my filter through education of like, is this true or not? And that's really the central question when I'm weighing my own beliefs. And I think that question is the big divide between the liberal and the conservative.
Yes, I think there's a couple things in a liberal arts education. One of it is learning, well, let's put it this way. The greatest benefit of an education is that you are getting to get the benefits of the accumulation of human knowledge over the centuries. You're getting that distilled down to highlights or more salient points. But everything that we've learned, I mean, there was so much that was just speculative for so many centuries. So as we go, we learn more. Like if somebody doesn't know, like what do psychologists know about human nature and human behavior? Well, without this kind of knowledge, you're basically kind of limited to just trying to observe patterns from people you know. Well, this is why, again, it's education. It tends to be like a big uniter because there's a big difference between people that grow up in a smaller area where you're learning from maybe a pool of 30,000 people versus an urban area where you're observing a pool of 300,000 or 3 million people. Okay. And you see a lot more things in cities that you don't see out in the country. And so this helps you to get a better understanding of what makes us tick. Okay. That's part of it. You learn those kinds of things. You learn about the physical world. You learn science. You learn astronomy, how they date fossils and, all these things and why we have the scientific theories we have. You're also learning about history and events, big events in human history. You start to see how people are, what people's preferences are, why when people thought a certain way, why things progressed and certain events happened because people had certain beliefs. And how things changed once people's beliefs changed. You also get exposed to new experiences. So like in art and literature and music, you get to, at least even if it's not your cup of tea, you start to understand why some people like reading poetry. Why is it that you're basically learning about other people, is largely what you're doing. Look at it this way. Every person that sits in a class, you're learning from a professor who has also sat in other classes with other professors who in turn sat in classes with other professors, and so on and so on and so on. And so you're a part of a chain of thousands of years of people passing down what they know to the next generation. There are a number of places where there's not really hard empirical evidence to guide us on it's this way more so than this way. And this is what gets rid of, it's education that gets rid of prejudice. Because once you know what the facts are, then you can judge based on facts, not based on guesses or your own emotional reactions to things that you've experienced, you know? And what makes it, and I've read articles where it's education, and let's put it this way, prejudice starts to dissipate when people have the ability to make finer distinctions. When people can't make finer distinctions, they put people all in one group. Okay. Oh, well, they're all the same. There's this group, they're this way. There's this group, they're this way. Okay. Education helps you to start to see that things are not that simple. And this is what I would say this: conservatism is largely a resistance to change. And why is it a resistance to change? Because when you're not educated and don't know what the facts are, you don't really understand the world that you live in or why people act the way they do, then change can be scary. You'd rather everything just stay the same where it's familiar to you. When you start to understand how things work, you may have a good idea, like, for example, something like artificial intelligence. If you know something about the world and the way technology works, this technology, you can at least have a better idea of how this might be used for good purposes, how it might be used for bad purposes, and ways that we could be better for it and ways that we actually might become too dependent on it and actually lose some of our own skills and abilities. Go ahead. I'm just kind of rambling on here, Isaac.
No, I think what you're saying is exactly right. That especially about like the greatest like weapon against prejudice is education. And I think that's true not just of like, oh, I'm prejudiced against people, but I'm prejudiced against certain ideas,
right?
Or, ways of doing things. Like, so let's take the abortion issue, right? When you first hear the abortion issue and you value life, you value people's rights to life, it seems pretty clear cut how being a anti-choice on this issue really does make intuitive sense.
Yes.
But you don't see a lot of educated people taking that stance. And I think it's because of two reasons about this issue that don't get a lot of public screen time, that aren't in the center of this issue. One is your right to privacy, which has to be violated in order to enforce laws that restrict abortions, right? Because the government has to essentially come between you and your doctor and, what's the word? The IRS does it when you've committed tax fraud.
Investigate or audit?
Yeah, they audit all of your medical procedures. Gotta make sure there's no abortion happening here.
Right.
And very few people want, the government auditing what they do medically. It's a lot of bureaucracy that you have to crawl through to enforce an abortion ban.
Yeah, absolutely.
Secondly, there's the whole like philosophical side that doesn't get talked about, which is you have a right to bodily autonomy, and that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if that person is dependent on your body for life or not. You should not be forced to provide life to someone else.
Yeah.
Those two things, once I think you're educated on like the sort of dynamics of it, you might say, well, it's a horrible thing that people have to get abortions, and that is a thing that people are pushed to do, and that there are circumstances that require you to do that. It's obviously traumatic for the mother. Obviously, it's a loss of life. Yes, but there are worse evils that are protected by people getting abortions.
Yes. Well, and that's another thing. It's basically education allows you to add nuance
exactly
to your beliefs.
Yeah. And that's just a good example case, because that's a very complex issue that doesn't play to politics well because of how complex it is, right? To talk about bodily autonomy and your right to privacy and why an abortion ban is a bad idea isn't as punchy in the news cycle as people are murdering babies.
Well, and this is the thing. When you study like some of these issues, or let's say something about biology, about fetal development and all of that, you start to be able to make distinctions. For example, like what is the state and capabilities of a zygote versus at what point do we start calling it a fetus? And at what point does it become sentient or have, say, a central nervous system? Different things like this. Anytime, and here's another thing, that abortion is used for more than just somebody saying, oops, I didn't want to get pregnant, so let's go kill my baby. Because that's the simplified view of how abortion is used. And here's the thing, no matter what, it's in society, and that's another thing, just even understanding the complexity of social issues helps you to have like a framework for realizing there are no optimal, like it's a lot of times you're choosing between the lesser of two evils.
Right.
So is like making all abortion illegal would be a worse thing than allowing early term abortions and, certain circumstances. I am not for people just saying, oh, well, gee whiz, I didn't feel like using contraception, so I want to end the pregnancy. I mean, there may be, maybe there's a certain window, like in the first couple weeks or something there. But what I'm saying is, once it starts to get that gray, is it really the average citizen's place then to say this is where the line needs to be drawn? And they're not even drawing a line. They just say, we don't want to allow anybody to draw a line, so we're just going to make it all illegal. See, this is the way a lot of, it's just like prohibition, and why prohibition was such a stupid thing. Yes, there are people that get drunk and do bad things when they're drunk, but banning alcohol caused far more damage than was happening with alcohol being legal.
Right. Well, we could modernize that conversation and talk about marijuana.
Absolutely.
And say like, okay, well, yes, obviously, like marijuana can have negative effects on your health or whatever you want to say, even though none of that has really been understood well because nobody has studied it.
Right.
What you can point to, though, and which for some reason nobody wants to talk about, is the U.S. has the highest per capita imprisoned population of anywhere in the world.
Yes.
We have more imprisoned people than China. We have more imprisoned people than North Korea. We are the number one in imprisoned people per capita. That's disgraceful. And it's mostly because of the war on drugs.
Yes.
It's the most authoritarian thing about our culture, that we're trying to, tell people what they can and can't do with their bodies for some like moral, high ground reason.
Yeah. Here, this is showing Federal Bureau of Prisons, 44.3% of all inmates are in for drug-related crimes.
That's absolutely unacceptable.
I know. It's like
opinion.
you could cut the prison population
almost in
half. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, 44.3%. Only 4.1. Then there's 4.1% of extortion, fraud, bribery, homicide, 3.4%, along with aggravated assault, kidnapping, 4.5% immigration. So anyway, there's different things there. Weapons, explosives, arson, 21.9%. That's probably starting to go up, but nevertheless. A liberal arts education. Now let me say this as well. Some of the, let's put it this way. The reason there are some students that come through college and they're not affected by what they learn, and there are others that are completely transformed by it. Okay. Part of why college tends to impact young adults and change their views is not merely because of what they're hearing in class. It's also because they're interacting like they are probably in a more diverse population than they've ever been in before. And even some people go to colleges that greatly restrict how diverse the population is. Now, we did an episode a while back on what are the limits, like is diversity just a good thing in and of itself?
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily. But when you're talking about processing new information and how to incorporate that into your beliefs, then it becomes even more interesting, both challenging and helpful in different ways, because you're encountering people who have different backgrounds than you do and different experiences and different customs and culture, and they are going to process it differently than you. And that's going to force you to think about, why do you believe what you believe?
Yeah.
And here's the difference. Okay. A college educated person, okay, I mean, with a liberal arts education, can better understand why they believe what they believe, as opposed to somebody else who has beliefs, but if asked to say why they know their beliefs are right and somebody else's are wrong, they can probably give you an explanation, but it's not a good one. It's going to be probably because this is all they've ever known, and all of their friends think this way.
Common sense. It's just common sense,
Yeah.
don't you? It's just common sense.
Yeah, that's
just look at it and you can see it's common sense.
Right, self-evident.
Yeah.
It's axiomatic. We used to use that one, but no, that's the difference. If you can't say why your views, you prefer this option over this option, if you don't even know what the other options are, oh my goodness. Well, then it's like people that say, oh, I know my religion's the one true religion. Well, what do you know about other religions? Well, I don't, because I don't need to know, because I already follow one true. I mean, how short-sighted and circular is that?
Well, it's places a lot of confidence in your own ability to discern.
Oh my. Yeah. Or, I guess maybe people just assume that they're part of some kind of select group that God has chosen to raise in the right environment so they get all the right beliefs and all of that. And I've even heard people say, yeah, we thank God that we were born in America and not some of these other places, where we'd be taught false gods. And they realize those people are probably saying the exact same thing.
Well, I think that's part of the reason that like American exceptionalism has become like embroiled with Christian nationalism, and
Right.
because it protects the unique character of the Christian identity.
Yeah. It was, let me say this, and I don't want to get off topic here, but in my opinion, it was almost inevitable that conservative Christianity, or let's just say evangelicalism, was going to become embroiled in politics, culture, something, well, not culture, politics, something of that sort, because it was losing the cultural war, and it still is. It is decreasing. All of religion is decreasing in the United States. In the West, like I said, the only places religion is on the rise are the Middle East due to birth rates, and that's the Islamic nations, and then Africa, the northern half Islamic, the southern half Christian, and Russia to a small extent because of how it was suppressed under the Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm.
But everywhere else in the world, religion is on the decline. Now, here's the thing. When you have a group of people who they're emotionally addicted to what they believe, but they realize they come to the realization that, well, they haven't come to the realization. They now see that fewer and fewer people agree with them. They have been a part of this culture where all this stuff is just accepted and taken for granted. So everybody just, well, I'm American, so I'm Christian or whatever. And it's just kind of accepted. It's like the convention. Well, once these conventions go away, now you have these folks who don't really have any good reasons for why they still have these beliefs except to create some kind. So they resort to some sort of victim mentality that it's some kind of a conspiracy to overthrow them and their way of life and their influence in society. They don't want to basically look in the mirror. They don't want to look in the mirror and say, I guess maybe we are on the wrong side of this issue.
Well, yeah, and once you're no longer the status quo, anything that is the status quo is interpreted as some sort of persecution.
Right. Yeah, and it's more.
I think you see this a lot on the LGBTQ issue.
Oh, absolutely.
That, like, they're shoving it down our throats everywhere.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's just that it's a loss of privilege. They had the privilege of suppressing anybody who didn't hold their views.
Well, and I think that's why in places like Louisiana, you get laws saying, no, you must put the 10 Commandments
up. Exactly. So they're going to have to, they are no longer going to get that suppression through cultural convention anymore. So now they're going to try to do it through the legal system somehow, even if it means railroading or destroying the government, our system of government in the process. It's not only incredibly dangerous, it is incredibly selfish and self-serving. How a group of people can put themselves above the rest of a population, assuming that somehow their way of life and way of viewing the world is superior to everybody else's. Nobody is asking them and forcing them to stop what they're doing. And nobody's even forced them to pay taxes. They're still not paying taxes. Nobody has asked them to do that. The thing is, though, they want their views to just be pushed out into society because the truth of the matter is the only people that are left are the people that really, they're just doing what they've always done, and they don't know anything any different, and they don't want to leave the cave, and they don't want to have to face the rest of the world. But since social media has come out, now they have to face it, and now they're angry. It's because social media is basically people poking their heads into the cave and saying, we don't think that way. And tell you the truth, the fact that social media has kind of brought out the worst in manners in our society all around on all sides of issues and political spectrum. People just aren't nice anymore. And that's unfortunate. And this talk, it is like a cultural war. And I hope it doesn't end up in a real war.
The rudeness you're talking about is something that is sort of like unique to the like social media scape, because like I have friends and family members who are conservatives. Most of my family is conservative. And we get along fine.
Right.
Like, and we have fierce disagreements.
Right.
We get along fine. It's when you're not face to face, though, it becomes a lot easier to be like, oh, those people are just morons.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You don't have to face somebody. You're not in the same room with them. And especially if you have anonymity.
Yeah.
Then you can really, really be terrible. So, yeah. So, what else? So the diploma divide.
The diploma divide.
So are we going, like, is this, we have at least this norm where, the norm is that you graduate from high school. I mean, how difficult would it be if that now were, say, like a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree? And that's not to say that people that don't, like, for example, I don't want a society where if you don't have a high school diploma, you can't get a job and live a decent life. If you're willing to work and, support your family and yourself, you should be able to do that. But it's up to individual citizens to say, hey, we're going to have to up our game here a little bit because there's too much deception. There's too many. And even when people aren't intentionally misleading people, there's all kinds of people now. That's the other side of it too. The internet has also allowed people to find like-minded people and they think that they're right. And everybody thinks they're an expert, even if they're not. And that's another reason why, if you've actually got an education with people that have credentials from reputable institutions, then there's a greater chance that these folks know what they're talking about. And a lot of it is coming down to how do you discern how reliable the sources of information are where you're getting your information. A college education is one of the better ways of giving yourself a good foundation to start with, because you can get to know your professors, know what makes them tick, what their backgrounds are, if they have any biases, what they are. And, I tell my students that they shouldn't just agree with me because I'm the professor. Hopefully I can make good arguments that they will find convincing or compelling. But if not, that should at least force them to have better reasons for disagreeing with me than they had when they came into the class. And most college students do not agree with all their professors. It's not
hopefully not.
Well, a lot of people that don't go to college, and then people that do go to college and they come back with different views and they have more nuanced liberal views, and they want to think that, they were brainwashed. No. Because you don't agree with everything you hear.
And that's, I think, one of the like funnier misconceptions about what a college education looks like is that like all of these professors are just like putting our students through a program of brainwashing. And like I had professors who were far, far more conservative than I was. And I had professors who were very much more liberal than I was at certain points in my education. And what the biggest difference between like the non-college atmosphere of discussion on critical issues and the college atmosphere is a willingness to disagree with one another without there being vitriol, right? The classroom setting is one of like, well, I disagree with your point here, but you have to give a reason for that, right? That's like that's the greatest value of a classroom is I think you should think this way or do this differently for these reasons. That alone, learning that skill goes a long way to escaping those sorts of, and I'll just be honest, those conservative mindsets of this is just common sense. This is just the way it is. You just look at it and then it's the way it is. It's common sense. You can just look at it. It's obvious.
Yeah. Well,
it's not obvious. There's actually a little bit more to it than that.
Yeah. I mean, you think about it. People don't have disagreements on gravity, what color is grass, or things that we can all observe empirically. And that is one of the greatest parts of higher education is you get this benefit of what is actually been observed by people in the past in a systematic way. And this includes all disciplines of knowledge. Even if you go into, say, performing arts, there are some things that people tend to find pleasant and other things that people tend to find unpleasant. And you're getting the benefit of somebody else's education and experience to have a framework for processing. And it gives you not only are processing this information, but then that also gives you more options with the direction of your life, how you respond to different situations. And I would say anybody who plans to be a parent should definitely go to college, because that will help you as much as anything, just understanding human beings and social dynamics and things like that, being able to even understand what your kids are studying in school. Those are extremely helpful in helping you maintain a good connection with your children as they're growing up. Anyway,
I think the you mentioned the like performing arts. I think art degrees are actually a great example, a good parallel to the little like the political side of this, because there's very few art degree people who are like really wild about crappy pop music.
Right.
And crappy pop music, I think, is like the perfect equivalent to crappy politics. There's like low effort.
Yeah,
like the most basic harmonies. This is just like pure candy for the brain, right? It's just like repetitive. This is fun to dance to. You jump up and down
clubhouse
and feel
dance
good.
Music. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But then what you're missing is all of the nuance of like, why do you like this other than just being manipulated by the sound?
Yes, absolutely.
Like what value does this have? Give some reason for what makes this good art.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, are there any untouched points that we need to address? I think we've worked this.
I'm sure there are, but not today.
Okay. Well, that's probably enough for today's episode. Okay. So we hope you've enjoyed all this extra happiness and cynicism, and
I think we've brought a little bit more of it to the episode.
Yes, absolutely. So we've enjoyed this, and if the world doesn't end, we will return, and This will be a two-part. This has been a two-part episode, and we will return with another one next week. Okay, take care, and we hope that all your cynicism is happy.